that, and then we can start it again.
Sure.
Okay, I'm going to try not to be too content heavy here. I just want to make sure that I'm introducing some concepts and hopefully hearing from you about kind of what questions or comments you have. But the first thing that I would start with are kind of what are some of the challenging behaviors that you've experienced, or just in general that parents experience when they're working with their kiddos? Kind of things come to mind.
And are there other people in the room? So is this being directed to everybody?
Yeah,
Okay, okay,
yeah. Feel free to contribute, Nina, anytime.
okay.
And you're only going to be able to hear me. So,
Okay, I'll
um,
play along. I'm really easy. Go for
okay. Yeah, yeah.
it.
Okay. So actually, yeah. Okay. So a couple things. I'm just going to repeat them so that Nina, you can hear. Some challenging behaviors include things like not listening, dawdling at our trying as people are trying to get ready for school or sports or going to bed. That's a big one. Talking back, difficulty with screen time or saying no to screen time. Um, Sometimes it sounds like some of the youngers are can have tantrums, olders just not doing what they've been told. Back talking. Yeah. Yeah. Nina, anything that you would add?
Those all sound great.
Yeah, creators are sad, right? And as we think about some of these things, one thing that I often hear from parents is that we kind of are experiencing a little bit of like an upside down pyramid, right? Like oftentimes, as these behaviors are kind of popping up, we're thinking about and seeing things kind of like a top heavy, where it almost feels like as we have more challenging behaviors, we end up responding more with like trying to teach our kids or tell them what to do, and perhaps even more discipline than we really want to be doing. It feels like it becomes kind of this top heavy pyramid where it almost becomes cyclic, where it takes away from this quality time or this opportunity for quality time, and then it makes it harder for us to feel connected because again, we start to feel like we're doing discipline and telling them what to do or doing a lot of teaching and coaching around these things and not getting to enjoy the good things. So this can be challenging to say the least for parents and caregivers. And what we really want to do is try to flip-flop that, right? Like in our ideal parenting world, we would have more of our time being this kind of quality connected time. And then the least used thing that we, again, ideally as caregivers would be doing would be this correction at the top, where we have very little time where we have to spend in consequences or making commands or trying to manage difficult behavior, and more time in this kind of quality, connected, enjoying each other's company. Now, this ideal can sound kind of lofty, like it's a reach. And that definitely can be true. But I challenge us to think about this as both a preventative measure and as the consequence of engaging in these behaviors. So, the more that we actually spend and concentrate our time on this quality connection, the more that we're going to see with that connection improvement in behaviors. And as those behaviors improve, we then get to spend more quality connected time. So, which comes first, right? Chicken or the egg? And in this case, they both, right? The quality connected time will often lead to increased trust, more attachment, better communication, increased capacities for our children. And with that, more likely, more positive behaviors. And then again, it will result in more positive behaviors. So as say this, I think it's great in theory, but I want to think about, okay, so that's a great ideal. We want to move that way. But it's hard for us as parents and caregivers once we're having these challenging, difficult behaviors. How do we respond to kiddos or when our kiddos are challenging us, it affects us. It makes it hard for us to kind of stay calm and show up in this way where we're focused on those behaviors. So, what are some of the ways that those challenging behaviors can impact us as parents? And Nina, feel free to jump in at any time. I can hear you. So, um, okay. Yes, losing our cool, feeling like we're even not being ourselves, maybe getting frustrated or angry at times, even when that's not what we want to be doing. Lost sleep, either from the stress or the worries or the behaviors themselves. Um, Feeling like we're out of options, like we escalate quickly. Yes, like we are taking things that maybe we do in reactionary spaces, like the phone or taking away, yes, video games or something that feels like we've just escalated in our discipline and then maybe not following up. Yeah. And then the pressure comes like, do I have to hold this hard line that I created? Do I feel like, am I compromising? Exhaustion, tired. Yeah. Anything, Nina, that you would add to that mix?
No, I mean, you keep taking the words out of my mouth. So, nope,
Okay.
all of that.
Okay. Sounds fair. Sounds fair. So, as parents, when we feel like we're reacting to challenging behaviors, right? Like, and then it feels like we've kind of lost that capacity to have this quality time with ourselves, quality time with our kiddos. And that can feel like we're losing some control. And one model that I want to share again, I said there's several pyramids. My first two were just kind of simplified versions, but this is an example of the Arbinger Institute created a pyramid, and it really says, okay, if you want to have that quality connection with your kids, the real base of that, what really is going to help is when we can create this path, this personal well-being. And I love this. And I feel like this is part of why in our third group or third series, we'll talk a lot about self-care and nurturing a parent. And I recall going to a parenting training where it was um, an hour about what these challenging behaviors are, what's going on, what's challenging with our kiddos. And then I was like, where's the solution? And it was like the last couple of minutes. The solution was extreme self care, right? When we take care of ourselves, it gives us the kind of brings us back to center, that homeostasis, and allows us to respond in a way that is calmer, more intentional, and more connected. So, if we want to have this ideal base of a connected relationship that ultimately can lead to better behaviors, that actually begins with us as an individual. There's a couple of images that you've all probably heard them in pop culture, but this idea of the airlines steward or stewardess talking about putting your mask on first, right? You put your mask on first before you help the vulnerable person or the kiddos who are near you. And when we put our masks on first, it allows us to kind of make sure that we are standing on our own feet or getting our own oxygen, our own needs are met, so we have something to give. So that's one image that I'll let sit with you. Another one that I really loved. I was teaching a workshop once, and I was working with a gentleman who did a lot of spiritual leadership. And I used this example of, you have to refill your own cup so that you have something to give. And he raised his hand and said, we've taken that image a step further. We imagine that our cups are sitting on a saucer. And instead of just having a full cup that you can share, you want to have your cup overflow onto the saucer. And what's overflowing is what you actually have to give to other people. So whether it's the oxygen mask or the overflowing kind of cup that what is left is sitting on that saucer. I love these examples, but oftentimes as parents, we feel like, I don't have the time for that. I am in survival mode. I can't take care of myself um, because I have to take care of these children or these kids or my family first. And the part of what the Arbinger Institute is saying with this as the foundation is that this kind of third example that I'll connect to is that when we care for ourselves, we're actually doing many things for our children. That is actually caring for our children. I see this more so when I think about maternal caregivers than paternal, but it doesn't mean that it's limited to that. This may resonate for many paternal caregivers. But a lot of times maternal caregivers are kind of taught to be in that martyr space, the give, and not care for self. And in that space, I find it's helpful to have people think about if you are uh, taking care of yourself, that's actually the foundational way that you can take care of your children. So flip it. Instead of that feeling like selfish time or time that I don't deserve or time away from my family, realize that that's actually time for your children. That's actually what the children or the youth in your life who depend on you need from you. It's a kind of a bit of a flipping the switch, seeing it from another angle. And why is that? We're going to talk in a second about why that's so important. And again, in week 3, we'll talk more about it. But if nothing else, think about what do you want for those children in the years to come? What about when they're parents? How do you want those children to treat themselves? You want your children to care for themselves, right? You also will make that link in just a moment about how this personal way of being, this kind of extreme self care, makes the development of children in your life that much stronger. So I'm making the argument now. I'm putting a pin in this topic a little bit, but it is so important as the foundation. The next thing that I would say are the relationships that the adults in the house are modeling, whether there's one adult with friends and family that support them as their village, if there's a partnership of sorts in the home, or whether that's other family members or friends, multi generational living, whatever it looks like in your home environment, those relationships, the adult to adult relationships, are the next foundation. I do a lot of work with parents, and it's oftentimes parents will come in because they feel like their children's challenging behavior needs to be fixed. And yes, there's an element to that without a doubt, not to minimize it, not to say that it's not important, but we also have to do our work as adults. How are we communicating? How are we dealing with conflict? How are we showing love? How do we address responsibilities? What about our own mental well being and how that impacts our partners? Are we caught up in only paying attention to our devices instead of our partner or those around us? So that partner relationships is really important. And then we get to the parent-child relationship. And that's what brought many of us here today. And I would say this is that connection we're talking about, right? If we want this pyramid to be true, this quality time and connection, in fact, we actually have to, that is probably sitting about the third level of this pyramid, right? So it's an opportunity for us to say, okay, the connection begins here. Then as we move forward, then we get into kind of the teaching, the commands, making commands or demands of our kids, and then ultimately discipline. So that's kind of the correcting part we've talked about. Any questions before I just do a little bit more of a magnifying glass onto the personal well-being? Yeah. Okay. Great question. Let me repeat that. So one question that I have is around, yes, I'll back it up. Sorry. When we're looking at those adult relationships, this is a really valid point. We don't have control over the other people either in our house or perhaps um, partners that if we're no longer living in the same house as the other parent, I would imagine, and Nina, I'm going to make a bridge here for your, but also if there's biological parents or other leaders in that child's life, like a caseworker or social worker, that there may be other decision makers that we don't have control over that relationship. And I think that's really valid. One thing that we would think about then is the adults in the home, what how our relationship is with other adults in our village, other adults that we um, do have access to. We want to role model what we would like to see from our children. Okay. So whether that's listening, being respectful in how we communicate, speaking with kindness, um, taking a pause before we respond, those sorts of strategies that we would like to see from our children, we want to model that when we are speaking to other adults. Does that make sense? Okay. So magnifying glass here. When we think about parent and child interaction or interconnection, and how our well-being is interconnected, I've kind of already given some examples: that oxygen mask, the cup overflowing, and a reframe from thinking of self-care as almost selfish or time away from family, and instead thinking about it as selfless. Self-care means that we are making ourselves secure and stable and calm so that we can show up for the children and those who depend on us. And when we're able to do that, as I mentioned, it can improve our own mental well being and give us that opportunity to respond to the challenges or the difficult behaviors in a way that is more true to who we want to be and who we are. It models what we would want for those young people in our lives. And also, one of the huge links that we know about is with when adults are taking care of themselves and they have strong mental well being, we see that play out in children's development, not just physical development, but also their mental emotional development and their social development. So, some links, and we'll again look at this in greater detail as we go forward, but not only kind of an attachment and bonding, trust, their increased capacity to do communication. So, this core tenant, this base of uh, well being as a strategy, is something that we want to make sure that we're really mindful of when we're trying to connect with our kiddos and to help with behaviors. This is what we need to keep coming back to. Any questions? Okay. I find this is a hard one sometimes for parents because we're back to like, okay, that's lovely, but this is what I feel like is happening. I'm on an upside down pyramid. I'm, again, in a survival mode. I feel like I am dealing constantly with challenging behaviors. And for me to take time out means I don't work and get paid. I have to keep an eye on my kiddos because there's safety issues. I don't have childcare. So we will continue to explore this and talk about structures or other ways and systems that we can put in place, other ways we can change that framework to help allow that. But the take home messages for today: yes, connection before correction, but part of the way we can connect is when we are selfless and engage in self care. All right. So I want to come back to this idea of connection. And I'd love to hear some of the ways people feel like they make this connection with their kiddos. How do you guys feel like you're connecting? Nina, feel free to jump in. Okay. Yes. Love it. Okay. Connecting bedtime when there's not resistance, books, bath times, those kinds of routines. Sometimes meals that they can feel rushed. Yeah. Yeah. The sports or activities, that sort of thing. Um, Yes, time away, like traveling, camping, those kinds of time in the car, even. I love that. We'll talk about that with teenagers in particular. When we can do things that don't have direct eye contact, sometimes that opens up the floor for conversations that we don't have otherwise. Yes, I agree. A lot of community back to bedtime. But a lot of times I notice that too with kiddos is that they are ready to spill the beans and start talking when they're supposed to be going to sleep. their little minds start to race and they're finally calm and they start to race and process things as they're trying to relax. And sometimes that's when we get those opportunities. I'll throw in one that I love and I notice with my kids. I call the two things. I used to be a victim advocate back in the day when I graduated from university. And one thing I remember police officers talking about when I would show up on scene and why they wanted me to be really mindful and why it was super helpful for me to also be there, other than the obvious supporting survivors of crime, was what's called excited utterances, right? Excited utterances. It's when something has just happened and they tell you all about it, right? Like they're actually telling the story or what happened, or things come out a little less filtered, but they're coming out. I have taken that forward in my parenting role. And I definitely think that when my children have just done something fun or not so fun, they've gone to a dance or a game, or they just came back, finished a sporting event, I almost always want to be the one to pick them up or to be the first one to see them and talk to them about it. Because I think that rings true for children as well. That you have that opportunity for excited utterances as they're talking about something that's just happened. That was good. And even the things that are hard. But we oftentimes know when something good is planned, at least. They're in choir, or they're doing a sporting event, or they had a dance, or and not all of these things, but it can be small things too. They had a sleepover with a friend, and just giving them space to run with it, those excited utterances. And the second thing that I've kind of keep as a theme in my head is something called um, uh, defining moments, right? Same idea ish, that I think there's defining moments in any relationship, right? Do you make that extra effort to go to Hawaii for your best friend's wedding, even though it's difficult, right? But for children, these defining moments um, are probably fewer and further between. They're pretty, I would say, they're more rare opportunities to really show up for your kids. Sometimes it's really hard things. Sometimes it's them either asking, are you knowing that they need you to hold something in confidence, or not lecture them when they're going through something difficult. Um, Maybe it's the way you show up for one of their friends. And these defining moments can really create a sense of trust and bonding over time. So listen for those, look for those, and see how we can maybe stay connected. Anyone else? Nina, anything you would say about connection? Again, if it's
Yeah.
okay, share kind of your experience of like being a foster mom. You probably have a variety of different windows and situations and
Yeah.
opportunities to connect. So this is probably really important for you.
Yeah, with younger children, I get on the floor with them and play. Whatever it is, I get out of the chair and sit on the floor with them. And for some reason, that just seems to really work. um, and play with them, whatever it may be. And then if it's an older child, then one-on-one time. I even remember from my own childhood that, especially if it's, a sibling set, just making that child feel special with one-on-one attention here and there.
I love it. I love it. And if anyone wasn't able to hear that well, I'm going to just recap these briefly. But one thing is getting on the floor, getting down at their level. Great example, Nina. And I can will share one of my favorite people in the world is my great niece. She's 2, and she showed up for Thanksgiving, and I just almost we were standing in the kitchen, and I plopped right down on the floor, like, and love that. I love that eye contact, that capacity to see them. And you can imagine how intimidating it is to have people always standing. And the second one, Nina shared, great one, and this is going to be a central tenet of what we talk about around connection is time, one-on-one time, especially for those teens or those olders. And actually, it's a tenet for all ages, but for teens in particular, it can be hard. And I think this is a good, perfect lead in. Thank you, Nina, to kind of where we're heading. Now, I'm sharing this next slide. It's a little bit complicated. It looks more complicated than it is. It's a lot of information in a small slide, but let me just kind of give a little bit of an introduction to this. So, The Incredible Years is a parenting program. I love it. I've been through it as a parent, but I also the tenets of Incredible Years is very similar to the key components of what we call parent child interaction therapy. Both of these are listed in your resources at the end of this visual. So if you need it, let me know. But Incredible Years and parent child interaction therapy. So, Incredible Years, maybe less therapeutic, more of a parenting program. PCIT, or parent child interaction therapy, more it's done with therapists and parents and children. And that's one of my specialty areas that I do. So, I really subscribe to both of these schools of thought. So you'll see some overlap, and this really gives us a great foundation as we're thinking about that pyramid with wanting to have connection at the base and that kind of consequences or discipline as the least used skill. Now, why it gets a little complicated, and we're not going to go over it all, but I just wanted to show you an example. The left-hand side here is what some of the benefits are, and the right-hand side are some of the things we do as parents. But you'll notice it really breaks down on the bottom of this pyramid. What are different ways to connect? And then as we move up towards kind of teaching and coaching, the setting expectations or making kind of some demands or commands from our children. And then ultimately, if there's consequences or discipline, right? Or what we'll call correction for the sake of today. So this is some real specific examples that I want to move into. But just using these pyramids again for me today, it's just the theme is the pyramids, but we're often flipped. We often feel like we're spending a lot of time in this correction space and not as much in connection. And what I want to do is help us all flip it back, where connection is the base, like this example or the Arbinger example. And corrections is one of the least used pieces. So let's talk about some of the different connection pieces. This is breaking down the base of the Incredible Years model and what are some specific examples of connection. And then I'm going to show you, do a little bit of a demo. And I'm going to try to do it, Nina, in a way that you can also see so we can capture that. And then we will talk about connection specifics with teens, what that might look like for those who have older kids in their world. And then we'll talk a little bit about correction. We're not going to go too terribly deep into correction because part of what makes corrections most successful, as we said, is having a connection. So we'll just give some tips and pointers on corrections before I kind of take a step back and see where people are at, what questions folks have, and share some additional resources. All right, so connection. This is again based on that Incredible Year model, Incredible Years, pardon me, model, and a couple of things to think about. When we have done our selfless self-care and we are able to show up, it allows these 6 elements to be much easier to implement. We are much more likely to be empathetic. Now let's define empathy really quick. Empathy, think about it kind of like walking alongside somebody. There's not a hierarchy where I'm trying to solve things for them. Here's my example, and I didn't create this one. So there's 3 different kinds of ways to think about this. One is pity. Pity is if you're walking in the forest with your friend and they fall into a pit, deep, dark pit, lots of rocks and pokey sticks down there. Pity is when you look down upon them and you're like, oh, I'm so sorry that happened to you. That looks like it really hurts. And I know it's dark and awful down there. That sucks for you. Like, that's awful. I'm so glad that I'm not down there. You know, you're really unlucky. It's when we are literally like looking down on somebody and we're feeling sorry for them. That's pity. Sympathy is technically often misused with empathy, but what sympathy is defined as is when we make that about us. And you've probably all met this sort of person. I know exactly what it feels like to be in that pit. I fell in that pit last year when I was walking. I had a rolled ankle. I had scratches for days. It took me weeks to heal. I was super scared of the dark after that. I wouldn't go walking in the forest. My pit was way worse than your pit, and it took me ages to get out of it. Right? Sympathy is when we make it about us. And we can do this unintentionally a lot as parents because we feel like we have walked through this forest many times before our child has. We have fallen in a pit many times and we know exactly what they're going through. But one, do we? Their pit may be different than ours. We see that all the time with kids. They have different social expectations. They've lived through COVID. They have telephones and technology that we didn't have. There's all sorts of different pits for them. And does it matter that we fell in that pit before? It allows us experience and wisdom. But what is the lesson that that pit can teach that child? Right? We don't need to come pull them out of the pit or just lecture at them about what we know about being stuck in a pit. We want to help them figure it out for themselves. We want them to honor and feel safe with us, that it's okay that it hurts. It's okay that it's dark and we're here with them, but we believe in them to figure this pit out for themselves. And that's where empathy comes in. So pity, poor you, sympathy, poor me. And empathy is walking alongside them. In this example, maybe we go down in the pit and sit there with them. They're like, I rolled my ankle and it really hurts. Yeah, you're in a lot of pain. And it doesn't just mean we have to sit there and hold hard things, which is an important task of empathy, being present and mindful, but it's also about being kind and connected. So instead of telling them what to do, you need to wrap your ankle, you need to start climbing out of that pit. Ask them, how can I support you right now? What do you need from me right now? Sometimes our youngers or our kiddos who have had more trauma might not know, might not articulate that. And that's when we might be able to say, would you like me to share some ideas about what I've heard worked for other people or my experience? For me, what helped me was I rolled my ankle or I started climbing did a few hard things at a time and then took a break or whatever that looks like. So try to walk alongside people, try to show that empathy, right? Most of these others are pretty self explanatory. Pay attention. Uh, this means for many of us, and I happen to have mine right here, set down your phone, set it down. This will be one of the next week's conversations. How do we actually be mindful and be involved? I cannot tell you how many parents will tell me like, I don't know, my sons play soccer. Oh, do you go to your son's soccer game? Oh no, I don't. I don't go. Or I went to their home week a couple of weeks ago. When our children are interested in something and they're good at it or they're trying to be good at it, it gives them a sense of purpose, a sense of competency, and a sense of connection. Some of the key elements that make people more likely to have increased mental well-being, so happier, more content, more connected, all of those things. So competency, commitment, connectedness, purpose, we want that. So whatever that is for kids, whether they're into anime or um, tabletop games or sport or an art, academics, reading, figure it out with them and support them. With my son, who is now 20, he's really into tabletop games. And I can tell you, I am not very good at them. Magic the Gathering is one of his passions. And sometimes it was hard to not only understand, but understand what he was talking about and to stay focused as he's telling me about these complicated things or these rules and connections. And I go play with him. on Friday nights at Paulina Springs Bookstore, they have Magic the Gathering. And if my son's in town and I can, I will go and I'll play. I don't go when he's not there. I'm not that interested in the game in and of itself. I'm interested in quality time with my son. And that means that it's not always about me and my interests. It's about them and their interests. What are they interested in? What gives them a sense of identity and purpose? And let's do that. Let's do that with them. Collaborative problem solving is a great parenting resource, and that's also listed in the resources. The state of Oregon actually offers a free collaborative problem solving. Oftentimes, you can find it through the Oregon Post Adoption Resource page. That's a great organization that helps a lot of folks who are doing fostering and adoptive care. But parents of any variety can sign up for collaborative problem solving. And the goal there with collaborative problem solving isn't to compromise and both be unhappy. It's to find out the root of what's going on, the challenge. Oftentimes, it's a misunderstanding or unknown or needed skill that the child has, and helping them with that behavior, and then finding a solution that you're both happy with. So, problem solving. We can, when there's a challenge or a problem as parents, as a correction, we can say, I'm the parent and I told you so. That doesn't work very often, and it's not a long term success story. When we flex that muscle, we need to do it sometimes. We definitely do, but it's not what's going to result in increased connection. Sometimes we compromise and say, you know, I need you home by midnight. They're like, I really have to drive all the way back from, I don't know, Bend. Can we say 12:30? And you're like, yes, that's fine. That is allowed sometimes too. When there's like a compromise that you can make, you can adjust your standards or expectations. But the best, most full way to make that connection is to do what we would call collaborative problem solving. And it can be a wonderful way to stay connected, but still start to do that teaching, setting expectations, and ultimately, if trying to avoid the discipline piece. Listening and talking. Now, I'm going to share with you towards the end in just a few minutes, I guess. At starting in February, I'm going to be doing a parenting discussion based. I'm just going to pop forward. So, pardon me for a second while we flip through things. We're going to do a parenting workshop. That's not the right word. It's going to be a parent book club for parenting or people who are caretaking. And we're going to do one a quarter. We're going to try this out. So, one every 3 months or so. And you don't have to have read the book. I want parents to like feel like I don't have time for this, but I still want to show up. And it's a chance to just be in community and to talk about some of these key tenets of what it means to show up and be caregivers for children. And so we're going to do parenting book discussions. So again, even if you don't show up, we'll spend a few minutes just kind of talking about the key themes about those books. If you've read it, great. If you haven't read it, great. Please come last minute, no registration required. This isn't the final flyer, so it's not ticketing so much, just registering. But the first month in February, we're going to do the whole brain child, which is great. Some of the ideas that we're talking about tonight. So if you have a chance to, let me hold that one up for you, Nina. The whole brain child. So that'll be February. We'll do one in May on the anxious generation. So this is a newer release. And this talks a lot about the role of screens and the nervous system and that sort of thing, and some of what we're seeing more kind of current topics. But the reason I wanted to say is this great book we'll do in August called How to Talk So Your Kids Will Listen and How to Listen So Your Kids Will Talk. So as we're talking about listening, if this is something that you're like, oh, I could use some help on, or I just need some help, feel free to check that one out too. All books, I know Paulina will carry them, but of course, we try to pick books that are available through the library as well. I love audiobooks, whatever you want. And again, not required reading to attend, but just something to think about. So when we're doing kind of connection, listening, right? That is a big piece of what connecting looks like. Um, okay, I'm just mindful of our time. So I want to share a little bit about connection from parent child interactive therapy framework. And I'm going to try to do this in a way that everybody can see. Um, but PCIT, parent child interaction therapy, and Incredible Years talk about how important quality one on one time is with our kids. And this is ideally from forever. So the beginning until they're 18 or more, trying to spend at least 5 minutes of what we call special time in therapy, but you can call it whatever you want. 5 minutes of dedicated time with your child every day. Now, this isn't going to be just time doing whatever, watching a movie or something else. The idea of this um, is that there would be specific tasks that you're going to be doing. This is really child directed play, or for our teens, teen directed. It's usually something that can be creative, like magnet blocks or Legos or Lincoln Logs for our younger kids, Play Doh, but you can even do some of that with older kids. But it could just be going for a walk with older kids. It's not something terribly structured like reading or puzzles, all great things. But this specific dedicated time is with specific types of play or time together. Um, so think about creative things that aren't structured, too structured, like reading or puzzles, not aggressive things like dinosaurs or sword playing, not sport, but things like Mr. Potato Head, blocks, Lincoln Logs, something that encourages creative play. Or again, for teens, there can still be elements of that, but it could even be with them going for a walk. Um, but you want to practice this in a way that it gives your child an opportunity to kind of be the boss. And what we're doing here is we're giving that child a leadership opportunity to say, you're worthy. I'm going to be reflecting back to them and helping them develop trust and language skills. And when I do this consistently, this special time, some of these ways of speaking to my child will surely trickle into my daily living. I don't have to always talk to them in this way, but it will trickle in. And some of these ways of showing up for my kiddo will allow for some of these other connections and opportunities to be deeper. And most definitely, what PCIT tells us, parent child interactive therapy, is that when you do this with kids, they are less likely to have problematic behaviors. So, three things that we're doing during special time, which we hope trickles into the rest of our days, but really concentrating on it for just 5 minutes a day while we're playing and having fun playing with our kids can make a big difference. So we want to take out commands, stop telling them what to do, take out the questions. We ask our kids, they get asked hundreds of questions every day, a lot of them by us. So try to take them out for these 5 minutes. And again, as your day progresses, you might find you naturally do less of those things. Great. And definitely take out the negative talk. We're not here to judge. We're not saying like good job, bad job on something. Well, we will say good job, but we'll be really specific. What we want to do is reflect what we hear them saying, describe their behaviors, and do what's called labeled praise. So I'm just gonna, sorry, I'm hooking this away from everybody just so you all can see. So if I were playing with these blocks, or my child was, let me be the child, I'm going to say things like, a behavior description might say, you're putting the blue block on top of the, or you're putting the blue tile on top of the red tile. You're adding a purple window to the house. You put a red roof on top of your house. You're adding a yellow brick. Good job sitting, or you're sitting in your chair. You're using an inside voice. I'm describing their behaviors like a sportscaster. I'm narrating what they're doing. Okay. Again, shows them what I want. I'm narrating those positive behaviors. I'm teaching them communication skills. I'm giving them attention, right? Positive attention. When our kids start to act up, oftentimes they're seeking attention, but it's negative. Positive attention. I'm also going to do what, so that was a behavior description. I'm going to build off of that and do what's called labeled praise. So, labeled praise, regular praise is just like, good job, well done, I like it. But instead of just that, add that to describing their behavior. So, you want them to hear what it is that you like. Good job putting the red brick on top of the house. Well done being creative on how to make this fort taller. Excellent job keeping your bum in the seat. Thank you for asking so nicely for me to hand you that brick. I like that. I like it when you keep are working so hard. Well done using your inside voice. Okay. So describe the behavior, labeled praise, praise a specific behavior. And the third thing to think about is to reflect back what they're saying. So a reflection back might be something like, if they say, I'm adding the red block, you would reflect it back. You're adding the red block. Same thing for teens. If they're telling you what their challenges are, reflect it back. Let them be heard. Okay. So have fun. Spend 5 minutes every day, one on one with your kid. Try to use that as a dedicated time where you can do something fun and creative with them. Try to take out the day to day conversational habits of commands and questions and negative things and really focus in. And this little bit of difference can make a huge impact on your relationship and the behaviors you're seeing with kids. I want to save questions to the end just because I'm mindful we're pushing up on time. I will continue maybe a couple minutes over if people are able to stay on, or if you have to go out, and I'll just make sure to catch the Q&A at the start of next time if anyone has anything lingering. Okay, so connections with teens. Think about all that we just talked about. That special time can be really important, but some considerations for our teens. We've already talked about trying to stay present when we're there. Think about when's a good time for them to talk. Some schools of thoughts are like, you should see them, talk with them for 7 minutes in the morning, after school, and in the evening. But that doesn't always work. We have a ton of research that teens need to be sleeping in more than they get to, hence why a lot of schools start later. It matters most for teens, not as much for our little kids. It's not as important that circadian rhythm is, but it is for teens. So mornings may not be a great time for them to talk to you, but find that works best for them and try to be present. Also, teens don't just need you to ask and be around for those special things that I talked about, the um, uh, excited utterances or the defining moments. But if you want to be around for the things that aren't planned, you have to just be present. You need to cross paths with them a lot for those opportunities to notice and listen and talk, to be present. Try to create one on one time together. And we already mentioned what are things that we can do to create space for our teens that aren't quite as intimidating, where I'm not looking at them across the table. I have found, and not only with my own children, but definitely with patients and in reading and research, that teens can respond really well when we're doing something together and they'll talk. Like we're both out for a walk and we're not looking at each other necessarily. But one of the best ones is drive time when we're in the car together. We lose that sometimes when they start to drive, but trying to have that opportunity to connect and listen to your kids. So turn down that loud music, just allow some space for talking and creating that opportunity. All right, I'm going to fly through corrections partly because we don't use them as much, ideally, right? That it becomes the tip of the pyramid, and we want to really focus on those connections. When we're moving towards like teaching and trying to create culture, try to standardize these things as much as you can. You don't want to be nagging your child, right? You don't need to hold the mental load and then be micromanaging them to do the dishes, do the dishes, do the dishes. You need to think about, and I'm not saying we all need to, but an idea is to think about creating systems that make that easier, especially in the summer or when your kids are home more. right? They should understand that they're in charge of dishes every other week, and then the other kid or sibling in the house is the opposite weeks, or whatever. You don't need to have to tell them, please do the dishes, or why aren't you looking at the dishes, or that sort of thing. When you do create family rules, try to keep them as simple as you can and something that can be consistent. Don't tell your kids to never interrupt you when you're on the phone. Someday, if there's an emergency, you might want them to interrupt you. So perhaps think about other family rules. And again, a few simple rules like be kind. If they violate the rules, there can be consequences. But hitting somebody or rolling their eyes or being snarky, those are all violations of the kindness rule, right? So instead of saying don't ever hit somebody, maybe that kindness rule is simple, it's overarching, and focus on what you do want when you're thinking about expectations in your house. When we're talking to children to give them a command, tell them what you want, one thing at a time. Try to be really clear and simple. And if you can, add what it is. So if you're playing with your kids and it's a simple thing like, please hand me the blue block so I can add it to my red one. Give them time to respond. Okay. It's tangible, it's clear, it's simple. One thing at a time. When you add the why, that can be really helpful, especially for our teens. Okay. And then wait. When it's behaviors that you don't want, as long as it's not destructive to themselves, somebody else, or property, a great strategy is to ignore it. Undesired behaviors are attention seeking behaviors. They're looking for attention from you, even if it's negative. So, cure to that, connection. Spend that quality time together. Flip side of that, if you get those behaviors, start by trying to ignore and then do a redirect or offer a distraction. And as soon as they come back to what it is you want, you praise them. So let's say we were playing blocks, and I'm using this for school age kids. So for what it's worth, you can take the lesson and advance it. But if they start like throwing something or doing something I don't want, what I'm going to do instead of focusing on them or even um, looking at them for their little, maybe they get the run and start to run around and do something not destructive, but distracting or negative. I instead start narrating what I'm doing. Bring the focus back to what I want. I'm building a tower. I'm putting the blue block on top of the red block. I'm putting another blue wall on. Oh, my blue tower fell over. Now look, I have a red and blue book. I'm going to try again. So now what I'm doing is I'm giving attention to what I'm up to and what I'm doing. And ultimately, for most children, they will loop back to me in what I'm doing because they want that attention. As soon as they re-engage, it's a positive reinforcement. Well done sitting on your bottom. Good job coming back and playing. Well done building your brick. So I'm not giving any attention to that negative behavior. And instead, I focus on what it is that I want and I praise them as soon as it comes back. Consequences, this is oftentimes where people want a lot of information. And in PCIT, we do talk about consequences. These can often involve things like timeout. And we kind of teach parents how to do that. But this is a very little lightly used strategy in parenting, ideally. A general thing I will say is try to make sure that the consequences fit the crime. Sometimes, if we haven't done that base of pyramid and taking good care of ourselves, we will react. And I think we heard this earlier and give a consequence that is too strong. And then we either have to reinforce it or enforce it, and we're not sure that that's what we want to do. Then we take that consequence away. So, part of consequences is that they need to be clear, appropriate, and consistent. Hold steady. So, something that is a great strategy if you ever find yourself kind of in the heat of the moment or not sure what to do, think about saying something along the lines of, there will be a consequence for that behavior. I'm not sure what that is yet. and I'm going to think about it and get back to you either tomorrow morning or later tonight or after I talk to your other parent, whatever that looks like. So give yourself permission to put a pin in something and come back to it once you've thought about what that's going to be. One, will you enforce it? Two, does it seem appropriate for what has happened? And as much as it can be, it should be a natural consequence to that behavior, right? If they forgot their bike somewhere and it's now lost, the natural consequence of that is to not have a bike, right? If they forgot their school lunch, the natural consequence isn't that they go hungry necessarily, but they eat hot lunch at school, right? So there are ways that there's natural consequences to things that are great opportunities for them to have kind of little pits of challenge or bigger pits of challenge, and for us to communicate to them that we believe that they can be a problem solver. And it helps build resilience in kids. I understand where I'm over time and I appreciate everybody. Thank you, Nina, also for being here. I probably have a couple more minutes if anyone does need to head out. I know we started also a couple minutes late, so thank you. And I'm just going to wrap up kind of by saying where we want to be isn't often where we find ourselves. And when we can do that, again, I'm going to call it extreme self care, but really selfless care so that we can stay calm and get our own needs met, our cup is overflowing into that saucer. That's one of the best things that we can do as a parent. And it's linked to all sorts of positive outcomes for our children. So if you have to reframe it to say, like, that care time of me is actually the best thing I can do for my kids, then reframe it like that. That's great. But what we ultimately want to be doing is creating a space where we become kind of the safety net. The kids go high, they go low, we're neutral, right? And that allows us the capacity to respond in ways that are appropriate, to stay calm, and ultimately to build up that trust, communicate those messages so that we can connect. And if we need to escalate to different behaviors, we can, but we will need them less and it will reinforce itself. So, kind of things to think of. Some of the programs that I talked about today and that I point you in the direction of, Incredible Years and Parent Child Interactive Therapy, those are very similar. I had mentioned collaborative problem solving. That's a free training you can also get through the state of Oregon. And I also kind of love this theory and model of compassionate parenting. It's that idea of empathy. You know, it doesn't mean I'm coming in and not letting there be consequences. You fell in the pit, we're in the pit, and that's okay. There's something to be learned in this pit, and you're tough. And I believe that you can get out of that pit. And I'm here to support you. I'm not here to problem solve, make it about me, and only like be like, oh, this really sucks for you. But that's that idea of compassionate parenting. I just will share, we're going to meet again this same time and place, same Zoom as well, Nina, if you end up needing it or anyone else chooses to come in that way, for the next 2 weeks. So next week is more about some of the specific behaviors we can create as strategies and habits to improve behaviors. And then our last week will be kind of about nurturing the parent. And then I am also doing a 2-part series through the Deschutes County Library around parenting, but it's called The Right Path. But the idea there is that we're going to be talking about alternatives to screens in particular and how to improve behaviors using things like books and written word. And then the third thing that we've already talked about is that parenting book-based discussion group that will be through Polina. And that's only once every 3 months for 2026. So it starts in February. Whew, that was a lot of information in a short amount of time. So I want to open the floor up if anyone has questions. And I know it's an evening. People might need to start heading home. So no worries. I'm going to start with you, Nina, just so that if I can turn off the recording if needed. But if you have any questions or comments, Nina, that might be helpful.
No questions, but I just want to thank you for putting this together. I'm
Oh,
glad that this is a resource right now.
yeah, my pleasure. And my pleasure. And feel free to reach out. This is true for anybody. There's cards here, Nina. You've got this, and you can grab a card next time if you want. But um, if anyone has any questions for me, you're welcome to text or email. I will do my best to respond. Otherwise, hopefully, it sounds like Nina will see you in person next time.
You got it. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, take care. Bye bye.